Wake that ass up
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building, Senator
That's
Tim
right,
Scott.
my South Carolina homeboy.
What's up, Charlamagne?
Listen, Tim, how you feeling first and foremost? How you quarantining?
Listen, man, I tell you what, social distancing is hard work. I'll be honest with you, but it's working out just fine. I get to see moms more now that I'm back in town than I ever have in the last 10 years. I'm also seeing friends from a distance and spending too much time on Zoom calls, if you know what I'm saying. But
I agree with that.
You know what I'm saying? It's interesting for where we are now. I mean, this pandemic has brought us to a place where I never thought this country would be. Frankly, the entire globe working together on a solution. That's a cool silver lining, but there's a lot of things that are happening that we should hop to. But I hope you all three are doing really well.
Yeah, doing pretty good.
Yes, sir.
Now, how is it affecting South Carolina? Let's start there. Of course, you're the senator of South Carolina. What's going on in South Carolina?
Well, we have thousands of cases. Just a few days ago, the governor shut the state down, stay at home, stay at work order, closed the beaches, which is a big deal. We have, if you haven't been here recently, I know Charlamagne has been. If you haven't been here recently, Charleston's the number one tourist destination in the country.
Really?
We are shut down, locked down, and that means all of our restaurants are closed, hotels are closed, and thousands of folks entering into the unemployment line for the first time in decades. As a matter of fact, DJ, we had an unemployment rate of 1.5%. We had more people working than we've ever seen, and now we have more people filing for unemployment than we've ever seen. So this pandemic, it takes no prisoners and doesn't discriminate. It's amazing what we're seeing happening throughout the country and frankly here at home. We have dozens of deaths at this point, probably 4 dozen. We have thousands of infected, but good news is today is 85 degrees and humidity is high.
Wow.
And the virus hates humidity and it hates heat. So I'm hoping that's good news for everybody.
Now, hold on, Tim. Now, the CDC said yesterday that wasn't true. They said that warm weather. Yes, they said warm weather don't kill the virus.
That's a myth.
So I would say that what we were hoping for, at least of what I understood, I spoke with the folks. I guess it's not my information. It's maybe 7 days old, but the assumption is that we will still see, as the heat rises and humidity rises, at least a fall off, a tapering off of the cases, and that's why they've been talking about the fall rebound. But sounds like your information may be more up-to-date than mine, but I've been consistently talking about that dripping, that fall off for a little while and coming back in the wintertime.
Isn't it crazy how fast things change, Senator Scott?
Yeah, Lord have mercy. It really is. I mean, I literally was on a call with Dr. Fauci last week when we were talking about the tapering off of the cases during the summertime, giving us a little more time to prepare for what could be interesting fall and winter. And so that was literally less than 7 days ago. So it's interesting to hear the latest information on what the heat and humidity doesn't do. I guess what they're looking at are the profiles in Singapore and some of the Asian countries where the heat was already over 80 degrees and the virus continued to spread. I think the question really is at what rate of the spread or the infectious rate, what was the consistent rate?
Right.
Gotcha.
Senator Rubio, you there?
Yep, good. So I was saying in Florida, we are a big state. We have people from all over the world that come here and all over the country, and so it adds, additional population. We people are responding, but it's a big challenge. I saw our unemployment numbers are through the roof. It's unbelievable. Just the number of people that are desperate, and the computer system can't handle that many people trying to get in at the same time. And hopefully we'll get that turned around too.
Listen, I want to talk to y'all both about the stimulus package, right? And, Senator Rubio, you've been a leader in developing the stimulus packages for small businesses, in particular the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program. So could you tell our audiences what that program is and how listeners that own small businesses can apply for those loans?
Yeah. So the first thing is the way it was designed is that if you're a small business, you would go into a bank, non-bank lender now are online, so we're going to get PayPal and Square up and running on this as well, credit union, community bank, and you basically have to prove 2 things, or really 1 thing, and that is your business is real, and number 2, how much is your monthly payroll, and you would get the equivalent of 250% of your monthly payroll, and as long as you use that money to pay your employees or rehire your employees or pay their benefits or pay rent, lease, and utilities, it's forgiven. It's not a loan. And any part of that that's not, or spent for something different, that would turn into a loan. And so, this thing was put together. It was put in place in 6 days. So it had 6 days to stand it up. So there was some, quirks here and there with the computer system and the banks being confused. But it's been getting better every day. As of last night, about 400,000 loans have already been approved, or these sorts of transfers equaling about $100 billion. So it's getting better every day. There was some early hiccups, and but now we think additional lenders are going to come in, like Square and PayPal, and that's really important. There's a lot of small businesses out there that don't have a traditional banking relationship, and most of these banks are only handling their own customers. So that's been a problem early on. We had one bank say they were only going to do their own customers, and only if they had a loan or a credit card for them. They changed that policy, but that was an early hiccup we had here.
Now,
Well, I want to follow. I want to follow up with Mark Rubio because I own several small businesses. You know what I mean, and I actually got approved for the PPP loan. But I saw my girl Stephanie Rule on MSNBC. She said in a tweet, she said, "Dear hedge funds, small PE firms, and creative lawyers for rich people with a whole lot of LLCs, the tax IDs for those receiving PPP loans will be made public, and I will search them until my last breath on earth. This loan is not intended for you. Your management fees are intact." What do you say to that? My girl Stephanie Rule was on MSNBC, and she said in a tweet, she said, "Dear hedge funds, small PE firms, and creative lawyers for rich people with a whole lot of LLCs, the tax IDs will be made public, and this loan is not intended for you." What do you say to that?
Yeah, I think the question you're asking is about the hedge fund. So what's happening is that there's some small businesses that had like a fund invest in them, right? And so this was not designed for hedge funds. Now, there's a difference between you're a new business and a hedge fund owns 20% of your company, and you're a business and a hedge fund owns 80% of your company. The second point I'd make is this is really not about the owners as much as it is about the employees, because understand that this turns into a loan unless they use that money to pay their employees.
Yes.
So that money's not used to pay their employees, and it's a loan. If they use it to pay their employees, it's forgiven. So I think we all agree that workers, no matter who you work for, we're trying to protect jobs and keep people off of the unemployment line as much as possible, because I think most people would prefer to have a check from a job than be collecting a government check that goes away in 4 months. But obviously, if we open it up to every kind of business, including those owned by large investment firms, we're going to run out of money really fast.
Right.
And they're probably going to be the ones that jump on it the quickest because they've got armies of lawyers and other people that can help them through it. And they probably have a banking relationship. They're going to jump in the front of the line there, too.
Now, Senator, what are you doing to make sure people are staying off the beaches? Because, I mean, here in New York and New Jersey, we were looking at the videos of the beaches in Florida. Like, man, people just don't get it. So how are you making sure people are keeping their distance and not going on those beaches?
Well, the beaches have been closed for 3 weeks. So, I don't, look, there's always going to be some percentage of the population that are knuckleheads. They're going to do what they're going to do, and they're not going to care. I'm not seeing a lot of that, though. I really am not. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people sort of taking it serious now. And you're seeing it in the numbers. Our numbers are doing better than they thought we would be at this point. Now, there's still people dying. It's still a terrible tragedy. But there's some early signs that we're starting to bend that curve a little bit, to flatten it. But we can't stop now. I mean, remember, this thing is lagging 14 days behind from the time you get it to the time you see it. So today what we're seeing is the impact of what people were doing 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago. But generally, I see people taking it serious, more masks and things like that. And the beaches are closed. But, every now and then you're going to have someone do something stupid. I mean, it just is unfortunate, but it's certainly not as bad as it was 3 weeks ago when they closed. I mean, everything's closed. You can't go anywhere right now down here.
Hey, Senator Scott, let me ask you a question. There's concern that the relief measures Congress has come up with won't actually make it to black-owned businesses. So, what steps are you and the Trump administration taking to make sure that black-owned businesses get the information they need about the help that's out there for them?
That's a good question. I'm on the Small Business Administration Committee as well, and one of the things I did on the SBA when we were designing this program was I made sure that we put in $10 million for the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agencies around the country, so that we would have specific targets for African-American businesses and Hispanic businesses to get information about where they should go in order to qualify for the loans. I mean, they got to remember, this is 100% federally backed money. That means that the underwriting process has never been simpler. And so I wanted to make sure that we had specific money targeting African American and Hispanic businesses, other minorities as well, through the MBDA programs, which are the countrywide regional offices. I've been in touch with the one in South Carolina. I've had a conversation with the director, one of the leaders, Mr. Childs, in the nation. We did a national minority vendors call, suppliers and businesses last Friday. We're having more communications this week. Been on, of course, Jay and I today, local African-American stations, then national stations, national news, trying to make sure I've spoken to about 2,000 to 3,000 African-American pastors over the last several days, making sure that we disseminate the information throughout the community. So every hand on deck, looking at the resources within the bill to make sure that we focus our attention on those small businesses that are typically most likely to be unbanked. And that's one of the challenges that you see as a former African-American business owner myself. It's harder to establish that banking relationship at the beginning of your business. It's harder to get the loans. So this is the time when we can see progress made on a front, because of the 100% federal-backed loans allows for relationships to be established and then prosper, because they now have the ability to build that relationship with the best conditions from a lending perspective in the worst conditions in the marketplace.
When this is over, and, there's going to be some businesses that are squashed that's not going to be able to make it. But how do we encourage more entrepreneurs to get back out there and to start opening up business? Is there a tax abatement thing that we're thinking about? Is there lending? Because, banks everybody's taking a wash right now. So how is that minority entrepreneur going to get back out there and feel confident to start investing again and start trying to build their community back up?
That's an excellent question, DJ. I along with Amy Klobuchar, started the Entrepreneurs Caucus. She and I are the co-chairs, trying to find a way to work in a bipartisan fashion to bring more attention to small businesses. And what we're looking at are ways to have more crowdfunding in the process, because as you already have intimated, there is a hard, long line for many businesses that are unknown to the banks and financial institutions to find themselves at the front of the line. So what we're trying to do is find a way to bridge that gap. When I started my Allstate franchise, I had to go to an African-American Business Owner of the Year to be the first investor in my business, so as to have the capital, because all the banks I went to said no, 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 and I didn't have a house to mortgage and no credit cards to borrow against. So I literally had to go a different route. And so when we come out of this crisis, what I think you'll see is you'll have more opportunities to work with folks in order to have their businesses funded through multiple streams and not simply the current streams that exist. I'm also working on some projects with some major African-American investors around this country to make sure that we start that process of engaging in the small business mindset in the 8th grade, in the 9th grade, and then working it through college, because if we don't plant those seeds for real when you're in school, you lose it. That's one of the reasons why I flunked out of high school when I was a freshman in high school. I saw no reason for me to actually apply myself to study, to work hard. And so I want to make sure that we bridge that gap for people before they even get to the chasm.
Both of y'all, Senator Scott, Senator Rubio, do you think the Trump administration's response could have been better to coronavirus?
Yeah. So I think the question is, that the administration's response could have been better. I think the answer is yes for every country in the world, unfortunately, because what happens is people like Tim and I, people that are in government, generally governments don't want to give people bad news. They don't want to inconvenience people. So if you look at every government in the world that's been late to respond, beginning in China, and you see it throughout Europe and here in the United States as well. Now, that said, I think the biggest thing to focus, and I think there's going to be time for accountability, right? Like, you got to look at what we did, what was done wrong, make sure that never happens again, and people know about it. That has to happen. But I want to tell you right now, like, we could have a second wave if we're not doing the right things now. If we make that same mistake again and pretend, okay, this is all going to end in a couple months. And so we have a vaccine. This is not going to end. This virus is going to be out there. I tell all these small businesses, we'll reopen, but it ain't going to be reopened like it used to be. It's going to be reopened, but people have to be 6 feet apart. It's going to reopen, but you're going to have less people in your business. Your hours might be restricted, that sort of thing. Plus, when you have that many unemployed people, it isn't like people are going to have a lot of money out there to be spending early on either. So that's another challenge. So we have to make sure that right now we are working on developing antiviral treatments so we could keep people off of ventilators and even out of the hospital. We have to keep building up our hospital capacity so we don't have that threat of getting overrun. And we're going to have to keep some of these restrictions even as we go on about life. And if we don't get that part wrong, there is no excuse for getting hit by a second wave, because now you've made the same mistake twice, and that would be inexcusable. And that's why we're watching what these other countries are doing as they're beginning to reopen a little bit to see what happens over there. And that's really the focus. But there will be time to look at it. And I would argue that I think all governments, including our own, were late in jumping on this thing. And we lost some valuable time.
It's funny that you said that. A lot of people think that when the country opens back up, it's going to be on and popping and everything's going to be okay. But it's going to take some time for people to get back on their feet and to catch up on some of their bills that they're behind. It's going to take a long time. So we're going to need as much help as possible.
Senator, I want to. What would you have done different? Because you ran for president. What would you have done different?
No, but I think in general, the question really is not what I've done, but what should have been done early on. And I think the first thing is, what you learn about these things is you would much rather be accused of overreacting than underreacting, okay? And so, I mean, early on, I think that what was inexcusable was the CDC testing. We decided to design our own test, which is what we normally did, and it worked well in Ebola, and it worked well with the swine flu. But they made a mistake, and these are good scientists that did it. These weren't politicians, but they messed up on it. I think that should have been picked up on earlier. And we should have jumped on what we're doing now, which is using alternatives, including some of the ones that were being used around the world. Because the key to this thing early on is finding the people that have been infected and isolating them and the people they've been in contact with. That's how you keep it from spreading. And we lost about a month with a test that wasn't working. So I think for me, that was kind of one of the early mistakes here that we should have jumped on earlier. And I think the second part about it is if you look at our national stockpiles of readiness, we are prepared for a pandemic to hit a city or a county or even a state, but not all 50 states at the same time. And that is something we probably should have ramped up a lot earlier. And people have been talking about this. There's a thing out on Netflix I think it's called Pandemic. I think it came out last year.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
And it's a documentary, and it sounded sounds like something they made yesterday, and they made it a year ago because they were warning. People have been warning about it, and we thought this was stuff you saw in movies. We didn't realize that a lot of people didn't realize that this was on us. So I think that the key would have been jumping on that CDC, the testing earlier. That could have made a big difference. It really could have.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that the importance of, I think, look at it in the three buckets. The containment strategy that was effective, the mitigation strategy that has been working pretty well, and then the testing strategy, which has been confusing. So the goal for us to get back to what we were talking about, DJ, on having this market humming, it's going to take actually being able to test hundreds of millions of Americans. I mean, there's going to be people who don't want to go back to school in the fall if they can't have their kids tested. There's going to be people who don't want to go to restaurants, who don't want to go back to work, who don't want to go into the grocery stores, who don't want to go to the beach. There's going to be the strong need for us to have testing, and not just 3-hour testing, but 5-minute testing. The finger prick test that they've used in South Korea and Germany, those are the type of tests that we have to have in the market as we head into summer, coming into fall, so that we can have the confidence. And this is the psychological scar tissue is going to be more important than perhaps any other reason why we don't get our act back up 100%. If we can't solve that psychological hurdle, if we don't overcome that psychological hurdle, we don't solve this problem for years to come. And so the testing confusion has to end, and it has to start with the ability to have home tests, or going to your CVS, your Walgreens, or someplace where there's 1,000 locations and everybody can get a test and get a result in 5 or 10 minutes. When we are there, this economy will thrive. But until then, we're going to be on survival mode.
Real quick, because we got to get up out of here.
We got to get reopened is the barbershop, so I'm going to start looking like the Tiger King over here.
Man, tell me about it.
See Charlamagne's here. Tell Charlamagne to take off his hood. Tell him to take off his hood.
No way, Jose. I don't know how to shave like Senator Scott. Okay, but I want to ask y'all this before we get out of here. Why don't more Republicans support direct payments to people when there's evidence it's the easiest and quickest way to stimulate the economy? Like when Andrew Yang talks about $1,000 a month, like do either of y'all support that? Because like y'all said, we have to get the economy back cracking once this is over, and that seems like the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, I don't support that. I think the fastest way for us to grow the economy for those folks who have been locked out of the economy the longest is to make sure that we don't have direct payments. What direct payments is a ceiling. It says this is the maximum you're going to have, and what you'll see is that the workforce participation rate will start to drip, and dripping in the wrong direction. I should say dive down. And when that happens, that most it cripples and paralyzes minority communities, because what we need is a full economy. When the economy is full, what you see happening, what we had before March was our wages were rising faster at the bottom than they were at the top. African-American workforce participation was going up. Our wages were going up. The chasm between the have and the have-nots were starting to close. Home ownership ticked up 2 points in the last 2 years. So when you look at the metrics that matter the most, what we found is that a socialism paradigm only says those at the top have more money, more power to make more decisions, and the ones at the bottom simply have to fall in line and follow, and that's just not going to work for our folks. And so if you want to have a more vibrant economy where you have more people are participating in that economy, that happens when every person has a chance to make decisions, and that means that we have to empower this economy to get back to the place where it was full already. Get back there is good news for those folks at the bottom of the food chain more than at the top of the food chain.
Right.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much,
And
guys,
Mark-
for checking in. We really appreciate it, man.
And Mark, please put on some longer shorts, man.
Thank you, Senators. We appreciate you guys.
No, they're short.
God bless, man.
All righty now.
I
Have a good one,
appreciate
guys.
y'all. Thank you.